All right, we're going to keep trying this again. This is the umpteenth take of video 61. Hopefully this one ends up recording sound. Today we're going to be talking about macromolecules. So there are four basic macromolecules that the body is going to digest and absorb. You may remember these from a previous nutrition or a health class. They are carbohydrates, proteins, fats, and then nucleic acids. Carbohydrates are going to be the body's preferred energy source. They're going to give it very quick and available energy, and when digested, they will be broken down into monosaccharides. Each gram of a carbohydrate is going to provide 4 kilocalories of energy per gram, and so that's 4,000 calories. That kilo meaning 1,000 little c calories will be important later. And then proteins are going to provide building blocks. Typically, your body is not going to want to use proteins for energy. It would rather build tissues with these proteins. But in the event that you do need to break them down for energy, they get broken down into amino acids and provide 4 kcal per gram. This kcal is the abbreviation for kilocalories, so just showing how multiple ways that we can show calories here. Fats are going to provide the body with long-term energy storage as well as insulation and protection. They play a major role. They are going to make up your cell membranes with that phospholipid bilayer, as well as be a part of the myelin sheath around your nerve cells. So very, very important. When broken down, they're going to break down into glycerol and fatty acids. And when broken down and used for energy, they're going to provide 9 calories per gram. And notice this calorie, the C is capitalized. That means it is the kilocalorie, or usually when we see these, this is the food calorie. So when you're looking at nutrition facts and it says there are X amount of calories per serving size, that C is always going to be capitalized because it's understood that we're measuring it in the thousands or in the kilos. So this is 9,000 little c calories or 9 big C calories per gram. Nucleic acids do not provide any sort of calorie nutrition, but they are going to be used to build DNA and RNA molecules, which obviously are very important to the body. As an aside, alcohol is going to provide around 7 calories per gram of energy, just due to some of the chemical makeups that it has. But actually, because even though it is more calorie dense than carbohydrates and proteins, that is not the reason people get beer bellies. In fact, the reason they do is because alcohol is considered a toxin in the body. And so when your liver is having to deal with large amounts of toxins, the liver is going to grow so that it's able to handle that large amount. And so that liver actually will start to increase in size, and that beer belly will actually start in the upper right quadrant of the abdomen and begin to grow there, and that's where the beer belly starts. So going back to carbohydrates and looking at them a little more in depth, again, they're the preferred energy source. They're going to be broken down into monosaccharides, the most famous of which is glucose. The reason it's the most famous, it's the most basic, and it is the one that will directly enter into glycolysis during cellular respiration. You may remember, hopefully you remember glycolysis and cellular respiration from biology. Carbohydrates, one thing you may hear with athletes is the practice of carbohydrate loading being used to enhance their abilities. And so what it does, it takes advantage of a skeletal muscle fiber's ability to temporarily store glycogen, which is a form of glucose in the body. And so 2 to 3 days before a competition, athletes will eat a very high carb diet and discontinue intense exercise so that those carbohydrates will get broken down into glucose and then transformed into glycogen and then stored in the skeletal muscle fibers. And those skeletal muscle fibers can have up to twice as much glycogen stored inside of them when somebody does this. And as a result, that glycogen is more easily and readily available for those skeletal muscle fibers to use for energy, and can actually help those skeletal muscle fibers maintain exercise levels by an extra 50%. So it actually is a scientifically backed way to increase performance. Here we can take a look at sort of a table of the breakdown of carbohydrates, going from starch and glycogen starting with salivary amylase being released in the oral cavity. It'll break it down into short branch polysaccharides or disaccharides. These are up here as a polysaccharide, so many saccharides hooked together. These are the disaccharides, so two monosaccharides hooked together. We really don't worry too much about the dextrins here, but you can see the path they take. But you can see maltose, sucrose, and lactose are all disaccharides. Basically, they're two simple sugar molecules hooked together. And then maltase, sucrase, and lactase are the enzymes that are going to break them apart. Maltose will get broken down into two glucose molecules. Sucrose will get broken down into a glucose and a fructose molecule. And lactose will get broken down into a glucose and galactose molecule. So fats, when the body is using them for energy, they get broken down into a form that readily enters the citric acid cycle, which you might remember is the third part of cellular respiration. Any sort of unused fats, though, are going to be turned into triglycerides and then stored in adipose tissue, which you can actually view under a microscope. It actually looks like a faintly yellow, whitish yellow empty cell, just because all the triglycerides don't really have much of a color. And so the cell is just storing as much triglyceride inside it as possible. They're actually fairly boring to look at under a microscope. But here you can see a picture of the citric acid cycle where the fats are going to enter into for cellular respiration when you are using them for energy. Here's another diagram on the absorption of fats. So you can see these fatty acids, monoglycerides being emulsified or chemically broken down, especially with the help of bile. And then they're going to be absorbed into, through that brush border, those microvilli into the cell, transported by Golgi bodies until they can be absorbed into a lacteal, which is a part of your lymph system. So you don't want to build up of fats in your blood. That can cause a lot of issues. So instead you let the fats be transported to the lymph system through these lacteals, and then the lymph system can control the passage of fats being moved into your bloodstream. Proteins, again, they can be used for energy, but your body would typically not like to use it because it makes a very acidic byproduct. And so people that are diabetic or on keto diets, you might hear of them suffering from ketoacidosis, which is where their blood turns very, very acidic as a result of all the ketones, which is a chemical functional group in their body. And so you'd prefer to not be running on proteins. It'll also steal protein from muscles and from nerves to be able to use them for energy. Usually at that point, it's not good. There are 20 different amino acids that are used to build all of the proteins that make up your body. 9 of them, or I should say 11 of them, your body can actually synthesize, but 9 of them your body cannot synthesize, and so they are called essential amino acids because they have to come from your diet. They cannot be synthesized by the body. And so people that are vegan or vegetarian oftentimes struggle with getting all of the amino acids that are necessary for the body, getting all 9 of those. Because if you don't have those amino acids, you don't have all the correct ingredients to build the proteins and to build your body. And so usually people that are vegetarian or vegan need a very wide array of different things that they're going to eat to ensure they get all the essential amino acids. And that's things like nuts, that's things like different legumes and beans and things like that to make sure that they are able to actually function properly. Here you can see a diagram of different things, parts of the digestive system and the absorption and digestion of proteins. So you can see it begins in the stomach with pepsin and hydrochloric acid beginning to denature those proteins. Eventually digesting enzymes are going to be secreted by the brush border, and eventually they're going to be uptaken in the small intestine. Vitamins and minerals, while not macromolecules, they are important for the body. We would call them micromolecules. They're needed in small amounts. Vitamins come in 2 forms, your fat-soluble and your water-soluble vitamins, and you can see each of the ones where category they fall under, and they're used to help build enzymes. And we'll talk about enzymes here in a minute. But fat-soluble vitamins, your A, D, E, K, can be stored in the liver for use whenever you need to build those enzymes. But water-soluble vitamins you are unable to store in your body, and so you have to continually supplement yourself with the B vitamins and the C and vitamin C from your diet in order to be able to continually build those enzymes. Generally, though, you don't need any sort of actual like multivitamin supplement in your diet. As long as you're eating a healthy diet, you should be getting more than enough vitamins than you need just from your diet. In fact, really the only thing that multivitamins are showing that they are actually doing to the body, and those that are having that have a normal, full, healthy diet, really is just making your urine darker because you're peeing out all of those vitamins right away. The only thing that I can kind of understand somebody needing a supplement on is things like iron in anemic individuals and women with high blood loss. But iron is not a vitamin, actually. It is instead a mineral. It is something that is needed in trace amounts in the body. Again, usually supplemented by a normal diet, but in certain cases you might be low. I know sometimes some people will take vitamin D supplements just because people are going out into the sun less and less. And so talking about vitamins helping out with enzymes and with enzymatic functions, we'll talk about enzymes here. Enzymes are basically catalysts in the human body. They're going to make some sort of chemical reaction either go faster or actually make it happen in the first place. They're going to be very, very specific. They're only going to work on one substrate. Usually those enzymes are only going to be working on one reactant and give you one product. We mentioned enzymes earlier that maltase, sucrase, lactase, those are enzymes that are going to break down the OSE form of them. So maltase is going to break down maltose, sucrase breaks down maltose, things like that. And they're going to be formed by ribosomes in the cell. And so we use our knowledge of enzymes actually in a part of our car known as the catalytic converter. So here in this, you have carbon monoxide being formed and oxygen being formed from the processes in the car. But carbon monoxide is a poisonous gas, and you don't want to release that poisonous gas into the atmosphere. Well, what you can do is use platinum as an enzyme, quote unquote, as an enzyme here to allow a chemical reaction to take place between carbon monoxide and oxygen. Naturally, carbon monoxide and oxygen would not react with one another, but carbon monoxide and oxygen will react with platinum, and then once they've reacted with platinum, they then can react with one another. And so as a result, platinum is an enzyme that allows this chemical reaction to take place, turning carbon monoxide and oxygen into harmless carbon dioxide. Here you can see an image of what an enzyme might look like working on a single substrate here. So this might be sucrose, for example, and the enzyme here is sucrase, where that sucrose is going to bind to the enzyme. The chemical reaction is going to take place, and then it will spit out its products. If this was sucrase and sucrose, it'd be spitting out a glucose and a fructose molecule. And so there we saw that how enzymes have an active site where the substrate is going to bind to the enzyme. When that does happen, we call it the enzyme substrate complex. And then from there, the chemical reaction is going to take place. Either those substrates are going to be tied together or they're going to be ripped apart. Fruits and vegetables are really good sources of vitamins and minerals, and then you turn around, those vitamins and minerals are going to be good for building those enzymes. So that's why fruits and vegetables are very important in your diet. And then the last thing on enzymes, they do come in two forms, a lock and key and an induced fit. And just based on the name, you might be able to figure out what they look like. Lock and key enzymes are going to have an enzyme that is very specific and only work on a perfectly fitting substrate, so your lock and your key. In an induced fit enzyme, you're going to have one substrate bind to the enzyme and form that enzyme substrate complex. And when the first substrate binds to the enzyme, that is going to induce or force a change in shape in the enzyme that is going to be perfectly ready for the second substrate. And then that chemical reaction can take place and the product can be spit out. So that is the lock and key and induced fit enzyme. So once again, hopefully this worked. That is video 61 on macromolecules and even a little bit of bonus on the micronutrients and enzymes. As always, if you have any questions, make sure you're letting me know.